There are two big items for this two-day meeting. The first was the rate structure and the compensation formula. And the second is the cross-empowerment. The cross-empowerment issue will be taken up in the meeting tomorrow. So today we've spent the whole day discussing the rate structure and the mode of generating the compensation amount. And a detailed presentation was made in the last meeting. It was explained as to what the rationale is. And I'm glad to inform you that we've been able to finalize the rate structure today. And the rate structure will be the following. That there will be a zero tax rate in which several items, which approximately constitute 50% of the consumer price index basket, would be included. We don't call it the exempted items, we'll call it the zero rated items. And it was decided that food grain used by common people would be in this category. So that would be zero rated, so that its impact in terms of inflationary pressure on common people is the least. The second category was decided as the 5% item. Now, the draft proposal had said 6%. Finally, we converged, and this was a consensus. These are all decisions by a complete consensus. That we decided that it will be a 5% duty, and these will be items of mass consumption which are used particularly by common people. There will be two standard rates of 12% and 18%. Some people had demanded that the standard rate be 18%, but considering the inflation impact of just having one standard rate, we have had two standard rates of 12 and 18%. Now, currently, there are several items, particularly white goods and others, which are taxed at an excise rate of 12.5 and a VAT is 14.5, which is 27%. Along with the cascading effect, it comes to anything between 30 to 31% for most of these items. So the present rate of tax is 30 to 31%. There was a suggestion in the draft to bring it down to 26%. But finally, the consensus is that these items, which including the cascading impact, are today taxed at 30 to 31%, will be now taxed at 28%. But with a rider. And the rider is that in this category, there are several items which are now being used increasingly as by a very large number of people, particularly the lower middle classes also. So one of the objects behind raising this from 26 to 28 is that the tax will be still below the present rate, but the additional revenue that we will get will be used for keeping the 5% items, the 6 into 5, that is for the weaker sections, keeping food grain exempted, and thirdly, which is equally important, transferring a number of items from this 28% category to the 18% category. Particularly those items which are now increasingly being used by lower middle classes. So for them, a 28 or a 30 or a 31% rate would be higher, so we are transferring them to this. And the additional revenue that we'll get by this 28 would be used to compensate these three categories, so that the GST itself has a progressive character itself. Now, there are several items which are taxed at a much higher rate. These are luxury products, in products, demerit goods. These include aerated drinks. These include pan masala, luxury cars, and tobacco products. Taxation. Now, all these things that I have told you, this was a consensus decision. Taxation on these is much higher than 28%. In fact, tobacco is about 65%. The others are close to 40%. In some case, 40 plus minus. It's in that range. So the additional amount to be charged on these products or any other product which fits into this category would be currently charged as a cess. Now this cess plus the energy cess, the clean energy cess on user of coal jointly will constitute the compensation pool. This compensation pool will have a sunset clause of 5 years. This will be reviewed on a year-to-year basis. After 5 years, and in case the compensation is surplus, the GST Council can even, and at the end of 5 years it will lapse. But before that, yearly, it will be reviewed and the Council will decide with regard to the flexibility of this pool. That is, whether it is to be subsumed, not subsumed, reduced, increased, whatever is to be done with this quantum. So the compensation will be funded out of this. Now there is a rough and ready calculation of an amount of about 50,000 crores required in the first year for compensation. If compensation is to be paid through tax collection, its cascading effect will be 1,72,000 crores of tax. Because out of that 1,72,000 crores, 50% would go to the states, 50% will come to the centre. Out of centre's share, 42% still will go to the states, and then centre will have 50,000 left. So, paying it out of tax would be hugely burdensome on the consumers. So we decided against that proposal. As far as the cess is concerned, this is not an additional levy. This is an existing levy, so the incidence of this will not be an additional burden of a single rupee. So the states will get compensated and the taxpayers don't have to pay, consumers don't have to pay anything extra. Because these are all cesses / taxes already being paid. As I said, it will lapse after 5 years. And then the council will decide annually how to subsume it or what to do with it. If there is any surplus amount left in this kitty, that would be shared on the basis that the council would decide, the normal sharing formula. We preferred this option of 28% on these 4 items with an additional cess over an alternative proposal which was to have a 40% category, because that would have reduced the cess quantum and would have been unable to fund the quantum. Now that alternative suggestion was made by Kerala, but then the first suggestion found a greater acceptability in the council. So except on this 28 or 40, that over and above 28, whether it should be assessed over and above 28 or it should be assessed over and above 40, except for this all other decisions are by an absolute consensus. On this, there was one suggestion by one of the members, which we noted, but he was also fair enough to say, recognize what the larger consensus was.
Just about one by one. Difference होगा मतलब 40 और 50% या 60% का, तो सेस का जो रेट होगा वो डिफरेंस होगा 28 और
देखिए, जो इन डीमेरिट गुड्स या लग्जरी प्रोडक्ट्स पे लेवी कम हो, वो नहीं होगा. जितना एग्जिस्टिंग अमाउंट है उतना होगा. वो एक्स्ट्रा जो देते हैं 28 से ऊपर, वो सेस के रूप में देंगे, उसमें से कॉम्पेंसेशन फंड कर देंगे, ताकि टैक्स पेयर के ऊपर कोई एडिशनल कॉम्पेंसेशन का बर्डन ना आए. अच्छा, लास्ट आइटम एक है गोल्ड का. इसको लेकर काफी चर्चा थी कि उसका टैक्स कितना करना चाहिए. केरला का एक सुझाव आया था इस पे कि ये जो जितने मैंने आपको निर्णय बताए हैं, ये आइटम्स फिट हो जाएं, और उसके बाद रेवेन्यू में हमारी फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी कितनी है, उस फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी के आधार पर गोल्ड को बाद में हम उस रिकमेंडेशन के बाद अमाउंट तय करेंगे. 2 रखना है या 3 रखना है या 4 रखना है, दैट विल डिपेंड ऑन द काइंड ऑफ रेवेन्यू फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी दैट वी हैव.
Sir, what is the estimate for revenue when the rate has been increased from 26 to 28? That additional revenue that you were mentioning?
You see, that additional revenue, as I have said, will be set off in 3 broad categories. That for the Aam Aadmi products, if I can broadly use that word, the tax will be now 5%, not 6%. So 1% वहां छोड़ दिया. दूसरा, कई आइटम्स ऐसे हैं जो हम 28 से 18 में ट्रांसफर करेंगे. देखिए, उसमें जो आज जिन पे 30-31% लगता है, उसमें वाइट गुड्स भी हैं और कई ऐसे आइटम्स हैं जो आम लोग भी यूज करते हैं. उसमें साबुन भी है, उसमें तेल भी है, उसमें शेविंग स्टिक भी है. देखिए, अब किस पे रहेगा ये सेक्रेटरीज तय करेंगे, लेकिन मैंने आपको 3 ऐसे आइटम्स बताए विच कैन मेक आउट अ केस फॉर रिडक्शन. No, we are broadly trying to take it to revenue neutrality. We are broadly taking it to revenue neutrality. And therefore the gains out of this will be set off by narrowing down the 28% slab. So you'll have lesser items in 28%.
one by one.
On automobiles and cars.
देखिए, luxury, there is a difference between cars and luxury cars. Cars will come under 28%, but luxury cars can afford to pay a little more.
Sir, can we just add this? Small cars are right now at 12.5% excise. So,
Whatever that those fitment of those items, as I said, will depend on what the secretaries decide and recommend to the council in the next meeting.
sir, whatever services.
सर्विसेज से लेकर सर क्लैरिटी चाहिए, क्योंकि 18
जब तय करेंगे आपको बता देंगे.
Sir, one more small question. Sir, a lot of people are saying so tobacco at 40% plus cess, so that will not happen. Not 28% plus cess, whatever the difference is.
Because you see, for 5 years you need money in the compensation kitty. You see, the GST council decides the compensation. It has also to decide where the compensation is to be funded from.
Gold, there's no decision.
Gold, as of today, there is no decision. It will be decided after we've done the fitment of each of these items, and then we see what is the revenue flexibility that we have.
सर 40% का ब्रैकेट सर है कि नहीं?
नहीं है.
Services will not have service taxation of services will be
Decide later.
Sir, how are you defining luxury goods? Is there a one size fits all approach that you're taking? Or
नहीं, देखिए, अभी तो उसमें स्पेसिफिक आइटम्स डाल दिए ना. लग्जरी कार्स है, फिर लग्जरी कार्स है, और इस टाइप के आइटम्स हैं.
सेस लगाने को लेकर सेस लगाने को लेकर
नहीं, अभी कोई जो कॉम्पनसेशन की सेस है उसके अलावा कोई सेस नहीं है.
28 के ऊपर ही.
So if we stand correctly,
in 18%, sir, and some of them at low.
अभी जिस दिन फॉर्मल डिसीजन ले लेंगे काउंसिल में आपको बताएंगे
if
ना.
we stand correctly, only the last rate has been decided by, you said there was one one vote of dissent, or Kerala was not agreeing.
It's not a note of, I'll tell you, it is an alternate suggestion on this question कि सेस 28 के ऊपर लगाओ या 40 के ऊपर लगाओ.
Can we say this is all is by consensus?
All is by consensus, except this one issue where Kerala had an alternate view.
So was there any voting today?
नहीं देखिए, हमारी पूरी कोशिश है कि वोटिंग जहां तक अवॉइड की जा सके करें, और अभी तक हमने अवॉइड किया है. Nobody has pressed for a voting also.
Sir, the slabs that you talked about today, does that mean for a common man, the outgo and indirect tax will perhaps be marginally lower with the implementation of GST?
Hopefully.
The fact that there are two standard rates, there'll be a lot of items in the 12% category. Otherwise, the anticipation was if there is only one standard rate, then everything will go up to 18. That's not the case. And similarly, we are now planning to transfer certain items from 28 to 18. And then the 30-31% category becomes 28. वहाँ 2-3% कम होता है.
And also whatever the efficiency gains.
And the lower rate we are keeping it as 5%.
And also the efficiency gains we get will serve to means you'll get lower rates.
Can you just one question on the small cars, will it be in the 28% bracket, sir?
देखिए items अब वो तय करें. Now the secretaries committee will meet, and in one of the later meetings they will give a report as to which item has been fitted into which category.
Sir, can we have some idea about what is the now average GST rate?
We'll have to
It will still depend upon which item
in which class.
So can't give you an exact number.
Items fit हो जाए ना.
But internationally, like where do we stand like on the GST standard rates?
Let's calculate that and we'll get back to
Sir,
you.
by when will these items be tabulated against the rate?
We'll start the exercise immediately after tomorrow's meeting.
Criticism that we are not having a single rate GST, we are having a 4-rate GST. So how do you see that?
Single rate would be highly inflationary कि जिस item पे 7% लग रहा है उसको हम 12% कर दें. And let me tell you, मतलब one possible answer to your question is all the Congress finance ministers strongly supported in one voice the proposal which we have come out with.
Thank you.